Today we are making a plum cake two ways. Our contestant number one is the viral New York Times Plum Torte by Marian Burroughs. And contestant number two is the plum cake by me. We'll compare their flavor, texture, and ease of preparation. Are you ready? Let's do it. Let's start with the New York Times Plum Torte. We'll need enough plums to cover the entire surface of the spring-form pan. Mine is 9 inches in diameter, and since my plums are relatively large today, I ended up needing 6.5 plums, but your mileage will vary. Once you cut the plums in half, remove the pit with a paring knife. Okay, so next we need to cream the sugar and butter in a bowl. This little sentence has been ruining my baked goods for years, but not today. Today I am armed with knowledge. Remember that video with the blue butter that taught me to cream properly? We'll finally put that knowledge to some delicious use. Although the recipe suggests that the butter should be softened, Stella Parks taught me better than that. The butter should be at 60 to 64 degrees. Otherwise, it won't be stable enough to hold the air bubbles and our cake will be dense. The recipe is a little vague on the amount of sugar. They suggest 3/4 to 1 cup. I'll go with the full cup. Sugar in cakes is not just about sweetness, it's about texture, and I don't want to sacrifice that. As all cakes, this one is somewhat sweet, but I'm hoping that the acidity of my plums will balance it. Alright, butter and sugar go into a stand mixer with a paddle attachment. Start on low and then crank up to medium. Mix until the mixture is homogeneous, sticks to the sides of the mixer, and resembles wet sand. This is unfortunately where many people stop, but we didn't even get started yet. Scrape down the bowl and beat on medium for 2 minutes. Scrape down the bowl again and beat for 1 minute. Scrape down the bowl again and take the temperature of your butter. You should be around 68 to 70 degrees. It's very important that your butter doesn't get above 70 or this airy network will collapse during baking. Give it the final 30 seconds and now your butter is light and fluffy. Now we need 1 cup of unbleached flour, sifted. No one in the US agrees on what is a cup of flour, but I'll go with the most common conversion of 142 grams per cup. 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and the recipe asks for a pinch of salt, optional. Give me a break, salt is never optional. This amount of ingredients needs 1/2 teaspoon of Diamond Crystal Kosher or 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. Now we need 2 eggs. The recipe doesn't specify the temperature, but I got them out of the fridge a couple of hours ago since Stella Park suggests cool room temperature eggs for her butter cakes. The only instruction from here on is to beat well. That's a bit misleading too, since beating too much will result in gluten development and a tough cake. I'll pulse it until the flour gets partially moistened so that it doesn't puff out of the mixer, and then run it just until most of the dry flour disappears, and give it a couple of folds by hand. Spoon the batter into a spring-form pan of 8, 9, or 10 inches. Mine is 9. There is no mention of buttering and flouring or lining the pan with parchment. I assume that's intentional, so I'll just go with that. Place the plum halves skin side up on top of the batter. Then it suggests cinnamon, sugar, and lemon juice, depending on how sour the plums are. Mine have a good bit of acidity, so I'll skip the lemon juice. Putting an unknown quantity of a wet ingredient on top of the cake makes me a little nervous. Bake 1 hour approximately. I baked until a knife inserted in the center came out clean, which indeed took about an hour. My cake has cooled and we're ready to unmold and taste. The cake texture is delicate and very pleasant. The first time I made this cake, it came out very dense, but that was a year ago before I knew how to cream butter and sugar. Also, I'm pretty sure I used the lower sugar amount back then. Now, the flavor is not all that interesting until you get to the plums. But when you do, wow! They taste almost caramelized, and the top of the cake forms a crispy crust which contrasts with the soft plums really beautifully. Okay, now let's make my plum cake. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees and butter a 13×9 baking dish. In a small bowl, combine 16 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour, 26 grams of granulated sugar, and 15 grams of cold butter cut into little pieces. Rub it with your fingertips until it turns into fine crumbs. We'll sprinkle the streusel topping on top of the cake before baking. Put it in the fridge until ready to use. We'll need about 700 grams of plums. That's the weight after removing the pits. Cut the plums in half. Then cut the piece with the pit in half again. Once you're down to a quarter, you can easily cut the pit out. Slice the plums into medium pieces. You can make the batter in a mixer, but by hand it doesn't take any longer, just takes a little muscle. This is not a butter cake, so don't worry, we're not creaming butter and sugar by hand. Only crazy people do that. All the ingredients can be straight from the fridge. No need to bring anything to room temperature. But if you live in Europe and store your eggs at room temperature, that's fine too. Beat the eggs and salt with a whisk until pale yellow and very foamy. This takes about 1 minute. Beat in 200 grams of sugar in 2 parts. I'll add half of it and beat for a minute, and another half and beat for another minute. You want this mixture to become pale yellow and form a bit of a ribbon when it falls off your whisk. Add 150 grams of sour cream, 150 grams of heavy cream, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Whisk until combined. Add 230 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour, no need to sift, and 15 grams of baking powder. Whisk very gently until almost combined. I go around once with my whisk and then shake it out. Then go around again and shake out again. By the end, I switch to a spatula and smash any big lumps, but little lumps are fine and even desirable. You don't want to overmix. Fold in the plums. Pour into the buttered baking dish and spread out evenly. Sprinkle with the streusel topping, and if you want, you can add some cinnamon or cardamom or both. Bake in the middle of the oven until the knife comes out clean. This will take about 50 minutes. Okay, our second plum cake has cooled and we're ready to taste. The presence of vanilla and the acidity from the sour cream gives this cake great flavor, and it is insanely fluffy and moist. The crust on this cake is short-lived. Due to the moisture content, it's only crispy for a few hours after baking, and then softens out. Compared to the New York Times version, this one is more comforting and homey. It is great for an afternoon tea, and the leftovers are perfect for breakfast the next day. But it doesn't offer the dramatic contrasts of the Plum Torte. Since I've baked my plum cake dozens of times, I know how it fares with different types of plums. It is very tolerant of slightly underripe plums or plums whose flavor is not all that interesting, because the batter itself provides some flavor. The New York Times cake really needs outstanding fruit. Due to what I had on hand, I ended up with 2 different types of plums in it. The pieces of the cake that got excellent plums came out simply magical. But the pieces that got okay plums were good, but not amazing. As far as the ease of preparation goes, I know that the New York Times wants to make things look easy and accessible, and they do that by withholding valuable information about the exact amounts of ingredients and the technique involved. Luckily, when it comes to desserts, most people are happy with anything that looks pretty and tastes sweet. But I'm not. And I found this kind of cake only wonderful with perfect technique and perfect fruit. To my surprise and delight, in spite of my obsessive precision, my cake turned out to be way more flexible than I expected. You might have noticed that it's very similar to an apple cake I made about a year ago. Well, the version I showed you today was created by one of my kids. They cut all the corners possible and somehow made this cake even better. They didn't bring ingredients to room temperature. They didn't sift the flour. They didn't use a mixer. They didn't have enough sour cream, so they ended up compensating with heavy cream. Not only did all these changes not hurt the cake, but replacing part of the sour cream with heavy cream made the cake lighter and fluffier. By the way, if you want the ultimate version of this cake, replace the sour cream with labneh. That's the Middle Eastern yogurt that is insanely fatty and insanely thick. Since not everyone has access to it, I didn't want to use it in the video, but it makes the most incredible cake. So if you're a casual baker that doesn't like to get too technical, I think you'll have better luck with my cake. But if you don't mind working on your technique and have some spectacular fruit to show off, I would go with the New York Times Plum Torte. It is a real showstopper of a dessert. Here are more thought-provoking culinary videos for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.